Hi there, I'm his Big Bear Ron. In this video, I'm going to read a few paragraphs from the book Sex in History, and I believe the pronunciation of the author's name is Reay Tannahill. As I had said before, I think this writer has done her homework and has done an excellent job of pulling together all of her information from the vast literature review that she has obviously completed. Her bibliography in the back is very extensive. I mean, we're talking about pages and pages and pages. Her footnotes are equally as entertaining as the rest of her book. And the book reads in a very delightful way. It's not cold. It doesn't come across as a blasé history book. She has livened it up. Very keen sense of humor, very keen sense of critique. And whether you agree or disagree with her, is beside the point. You can interact with it. Okay, I'm going to read from the section called The Prehistoric World, and this particular chapter is called In the Beginning. And the section will be Sex and the Social Role. Whatever the marital status of Homo erectus and his successors, the conditions under which they not only survived, but astonishingly progressed, must at first have favored some kind of commune living. Early man seems to have had a mobile habit of life from necessity as much as from choice. Though he may have inherited the territorial instincts of his forebears, it seems that his brain must have begun to override them. As game grew scarcer and vegetation scantier during the periods of climatic change, he would find that he had stripped his own section of the landscape so that it was necessary to move on. Sometimes he might have to dispute a new district with its current inhabitants, and there would be war. The vanquished being driven out, or, if they were few, incorporated into the tribe of the victors. Not until 350,000 years ago did he begin to settle down, and the reasons for it appears to have been a deterioration in the world's climate. For much of the era known as the Pleistocene, geologically, the last 2 million years, there have been slow fluctuations from pleasant warmth to biting, vicious cold. During the worst of the cold spells, glaciers normally confined to high mountain ranges expanded and merged so that sometimes an ice sheet hundreds of feet thick advanced as far south as present-day New York, London, and Kiev. At such times, the 500,000 people who formed the total of the world's early human population congregated in a few temperate regions around the Mediterranean. For example, there was still somewhat that... where there was still something that might have been described as summer, and in areas like the Sahara, where, strange as it may seem today, heavy rainfall supported a thriving flora and fauna. But some branches of the Homo erectus family, including Peking man, discovered that it was possible to survive almost on the edge of the ice sheets by taking refuge in caves and utilizing something that the emerging human race had never conquered before: fire. It was to be tens of thousands of years before cave living became general in Europe. But the new mode of life, the warmth, light, and protection in place of the chill and menacing dark, must have had a revolutionary effect on the humanizing process. Where abundant vegetation with its promise of plentiful game had been enough to attract man the wanderer, man the cave dweller had more specific requirements. Caves were scarcer than good pastures, and when he found a combination of the two that suited him, he stayed. Cave living imposed its own logic. caves as large as the famous painted one in Altamira on the northern coast of Spain, which stretches back through solid limestone for a distance of 300 yards, were the exception rather than the rule. More commonly, they might be the size of the main rotunda at Lascaux in France, which, inhabited and splendidly decorated with paintings of animals more than 15,000 years ago, measures only 30 yards long by 10 wide, not much more than a modern house built on a spacious ground plan. More commonly still, the immigrant human community would find itself having to fit into a honeycomb of smaller caves. From open countryside to the physical and psychological constrictions of stone walls must have resulted in some social upheaval, even if the campfire hierarchy dictated who should have the finest and who the least desirable lodging. Let me start that paragraph again. From open countryside to the physical and psychological constrictions of stone walls must have resulted in some social upheaval, even if the campfire hierarchy dictated who should have the finest and who the least desirable lodging. Splinterings and regroupings were inevitable, and it may have been at this stage that the idea of, quote, the family, unquote, began to take on reality. The prehistoric family was centered on the woman, like cytoplasm around a nucleus, for the maternal relationship was the only one that was distinctively different from other tribal relationships. It had to be remembered that it was probably very late indeed in terms of human evolution before man's role in procreation was discovered. It was not obvious. Over the last 100 years, anthropologists have been consistently taken aback to discover primitive tribes still apparently ignorant of the relationship between coitus and conception, and it seems likely that such ignorance was general until about the late 9000 BC. Now I'm going to skip over